"I ain't strong, but I can cook," she said, until the lonely rancher whispered, "Will you marry me?" Lily stood behind the counter, her hands moving skillfully as she worked. The smell of freshly baked bread and sizzling meat filled the small diner, offering warmth and comfort to anyone who stepped inside. It was the kind of place that always felt like home, a refuge for the weary travelers and tired ranchers who passed through the quiet, isolated town. For Lily, this diner was both a sanctuary and a reminder of everything she had lost. She had grown up here, her parents having owned it before they passed away in a car accident a few years ago. Since then, Lily had taken over the business, running it day in and day out with little more than her determination and her ability to cook. She wasn't particularly strong or talented in other areas, but she had learned the art of making food that could heal, comfort, and even bring people back from their worst days. Her life wasn't easy. The small-town life was full of quiet struggles, paying bills, keeping the diner running, and dealing with the quiet loneliness that seemed to settle in her bones. Most days she didn't mind. She was used to the work. She could handle the long hours and the lack of excitement. In fact, she preferred it. It was simpler, quieter, and safer. But sometimes, late at night, when she was closing up the diner, she'd wonder if it was enough. She wondered if this life was all she could ever have. Would anyone ever see her beyond the kitchen? Would anyone ever love her for more than just the meals she served? Despite the loneliness that often crept in, Lily kept a smile on her face. She never let her customers see the exhaustion or doubt in her eyes. They came to her for comfort, and she gave it to them without complaint. It wasn't much, but she believed in the power of food, how it could bring people together, make them feel seen and heard, even if for just a few moments. And that's what kept her going. Her customers were mostly regulars, farmers and ranchers who had lived in the area their whole lives. They came in each morning for coffee and a plate of eggs, bacon and toast. They exchanged brief pleasantries, talked about the weather, and left just as quickly as they came, heading back to their farms and ranches. But that was fine. Lily didn't mind. She wasn't looking for anything more. Her days followed a predictable rhythm. She opened the diner at dawn, cleaned, prepared the food, and served it until the evening, when the last customer finally left. Then she would close up, clean again, and head to bed, only to do it all over again the next day. There was a sense of routine that brought her comfort, even if it wasn't the kind of life she had imagined when she was younger. But things began to change one particular evening. It started with the sound of the doorbell ringing as a man walked into the diner. At first glance, he seemed like another rancher, just like the others. He was tall, with broad shoulders and rough, calloused hands. His dark hair was slightly messy, and his face had the look of someone who had spent too many years working under the sun. But it was his eyes that caught Lily's attention. They were a deep, quiet brown, like the color of the earth after a rainstorm, and they seemed to hold something more than the usual casual glance. The man didn't sit at the counter like most of the customers. Instead, he walked to the corner booth, sat down, and looked around as though he was surveying his surroundings. Lily couldn't help but notice him. There was something about the way he carried himself, something that felt different. He didn't seem in a rush, nor did he look like he was there just to grab a quick bite. He seemed like someone who was looking for something, though she didn't know what. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. It wasn't like her to stare, but there was something intriguing about this man. He wasn't like the others. Maybe it was because he was new, or maybe it was because of the way he sat there, almost like he was waiting for something. Lily made her way over to him, smiling her usual friendly smile. "What can I get you?" she asked, ready to take his order. The man looked up, and their eyes met for just a brief moment. There was a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. But then he smiled back, a small, polite smile that seemed to hint at something deeper. "I'll have the special," he said, his voice low and steady. Lily nodded and turned to head back to the kitchen, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this man was different. She found herself thinking about him more than she should have. She had no reason to. He was just another customer, right? But there was something in the way he carried himself, something in his quiet demeanor that made her curious. As the days went on, he returned to the diner. He was a man of few words, but each time he came in they exchanged polite greetings, and each time Lily found herself noticing him more. There was something about him that made her feel a little less alone, even though he didn't say much. Maybe it was the way he looked at her when he spoke, like he was genuinely interested in what she had to say. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, she felt like someone was paying attention to her, not just her cooking, but to her. One afternoon, as the diner emptied out after the lunch rush, the man, whose name she had learned was Jake, stayed longer than usual. It wasn't uncommon for him to linger over his coffee, but this time he didn't seem to be in any hurry to leave. Lily glanced over at him as she wiped down the counter, wondering what it was that made him so different from the others. Finally, he spoke. "I've been coming here for a while now," he said, his voice steady, though there was a hint of something more beneath it. "And I can't help but wonder, what's your story, Lily?" Lily paused, her rag still in her hand. No one ever asked her that. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had never thought much about her own story. She had always been too busy living it. "I don't know," she said softly. "I guess it's just the story of a woman trying to make a living, keep a roof over her head, and keep things going." Jake nodded, as though he understood. "I know what that's like," he said. "I've been doing the same with my ranch. It's not easy, but it's all we can do." Lily smiled, feeling a strange sense of connection to him. Maybe they weren't so different after all. After that conversation, Lily found herself thinking about Jake more than she'd like to admit. He had come into the diner as just another customer, like the many others who passed through her doors every day. But now there was something different about him. He wasn't just another face in the crowd. He had become someone she looked forward to seeing. Jake's visits became more regular, and so did their conversations. It wasn't much, but they started to talk about their lives, his ranch, her diner, the struggles they faced. Jake spoke of the land he had inherited from his father, the long hours of hard work, and the feeling of responsibility weighing him down. He had never married, never settled down, always focused on the ranch and the work that needed to be done. He told Lily about his quiet, lonely existence, about how he had never found anyone who truly understood him, and how sometimes the loneliness was harder to handle than the work itself. Lily, in turn, shared her own story. She spoke about how she had taken over her family's diner after her parents had passed. She told him about the long hours she spent cooking, the exhaustion that came with each day, and how she never really had time for herself. She talked about the quiet town, the routine of her days, and how, sometimes, she wondered if this was all there was to life. They found comfort in these conversations, in sharing their burdens, even if only for a few minutes. They didn't need to say much to understand each other. It was as if they both knew what it felt like to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Over time, Jake began to stay longer at the diner. He'd come in for a cup of coffee, but instead of leaving quickly like he used to, he'd sit there for hours, talking to Lily, or just watching her work. He'd offer to help with little things, carrying the trays, wiping down tables, or simply keeping her company. She never asked him to, but it seemed to make him feel better, like he had a purpose when he was there. Lily had to admit, it felt nice having someone around, especially someone like Jake. There was something about him that made her feel a little less alone. He wasn't overly talkative, but there was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. He didn't ask for anything, just quietly offered what he could. One evening, as the sun began to set and the diner started to empty, Lily found herself sitting across from Jake, a warm cup of coffee in her hands. The soft glow of the lamps cast a peaceful light over the room. The familiar sounds of the diner, the clinking of dishes, the hum of the old refrigerator, seemed almost comforting now. Jake had just finished his meal and was now sitting back, looking at her. "You ever think about leaving?" Jake asked, his voice quieter than usual. Lily blinked in surprise. "Leaving? Where would I go?" Jake shrugged, his eyes thoughtful. "Anywhere. A bigger city, maybe. Somewhere where things aren't so still. I know I've thought about leaving the ranch sometimes. It feels like everything here is stuck in time." Lily let out a soft laugh. "I've thought about it too, but every time I think about leaving, I realize that this place is all I know. The diner, the people, the rhythm of the days. It's my life now." "I get that," Jake said, his voice full of understanding. "It's hard to leave something behind when it's all you've ever known." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. Lily couldn't help but wonder if Jake had ever felt the same pull she had. Had he ever longed for something more, something different? Or was he just stuck, like her, in a life that didn't seem to have much room for anything else? The thought made her heart ache. Was this all she would ever be? A cook in a small-town diner, alone with her thoughts and her recipes? She wanted more, but she wasn't sure how to take the first step. Just as she was about to speak, Jake's voice broke through her thoughts again. "You know, you're the best cook I've ever met." Lily looked up, surprised by the sudden compliment. She smiled shyly. "Thanks. I try my best." "No, really," Jake said, leaning forward. "I've been all over this country, but I've never tasted anything like the food you make. It's like you put a little piece of yourself into every meal. I don't know if you realize that, but it's special." Lily felt a warm blush spread across her cheeks. It was strange to hear someone say something like that. She had never thought much about her cooking. To her, it was just something she did. But to Jake, it seemed to mean more. I just like feeding people," Lily said softly, her eyes meeting his. "It's the one thing I know how to do well." Jake's gaze softened. "You're more than that, Lily. You're strong, even if you don't see it." Lily looked down at her hands, unsure of what to say. She had never considered herself strong. She was just someone who worked hard, who cooked, and who kept the diner running. She didn't have much else to offer, or so she thought. But Jake's words lingered in her mind as she cleaned up the last of the dishes that evening. "You're more than that." Could it be true? Could she really be more than just the cook at a small-town diner? Could she have more to offer than just her food? She didn't know. But as the days passed, she began to realize that maybe there was more to her life than she had ever given herself credit for. And maybe, just maybe, Jake saw something in her that she had never seen in herself. The next time Jake came in, their conversation picked up where it had left off. He was a little more open than before, and so was she. They laughed more, joked about the small-town life, and even talked about their dreams, though neither of them seemed to know how to take the first step toward making those dreams a reality. But somehow, just being around Jake felt different. For the first time in a long time, Lily didn't feel like she was just a woman working to survive. She felt like she was part of something bigger, something that might actually have a future. And though neither of them said it aloud, there was a quiet understanding between them. Something was changing. Jake kept coming back, and with each visit, the connection between them grew stronger. And Lily couldn't help but wonder if this was what she had been waiting for all along, a chance to have more than just the life she had always known. Days turned into weeks, and as time went by, Lily and Jake found themselves growing closer. Their conversations became more natural, more personal, like they were finally opening up to one another. Jake no longer just visited the diner for a meal. He came to see Lily. And every time he walked through the door, a small part of her heart skipped a beat. She didn't understand why this feeling was so different from the others, but it was. Lily had never been one to openly show emotions, but around Jake, she felt like she could be herself. There were no expectations, no pressure, just two people talking and sharing their stories. It was like a quiet connection that neither of them had to force. They spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing their dreams. Jake would talk about the ranch, about his father's land, and the responsibilities that weighed on him. He shared his frustrations about not having anyone to help him, someone to share the load. But despite his loneliness, there was a softness in his voice when he spoke about it, like he had come to accept it. Lily, on the other hand, had always kept her dreams to herself. She never dared to think she could have more than the diner and the small-town life she had always known. She had resigned herself to the idea that she would never get out, that this would be her life forever. But Jake's presence made her question that. He made her wonder if there could be more to life than just surviving. He made her feel like she mattered, like she had something more to offer than just her cooking. One evening, after the diner had quieted down and the last customer had left, Lily found herself alone in the kitchen, cleaning up. She was lost in her thoughts, her mind drifting back to the past few weeks and how much had changed since Jake started coming in. She hadn't expected any of this. She hadn't expected to feel so alive. But that was exactly what was happening. She could feel a spark inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. It was hope, a hope she didn't even realize she had lost. Just as she was about to finish cleaning, she heard the soft jingle of the doorbell. She turned around, expecting it to be one of the usual late-night customers. But instead, she saw Jake standing in the doorway. He wasn't dressed in his usual rancher clothes. Instead, he wore a simple button-up shirt, his sleeves rolled up, his boots dusty from the day's work. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lily simply stared at him, surprised by the unexpected visit. Jake seemed just as unsure, his eyes locked on hers, as though trying to figure out what to say. It was rare for him to come in at this time of night. Usually he would come for breakfast or lunch, grab a quick bite, and leave. But tonight was different. There was a quiet tension in the air, something that neither of them had addressed but both could feel. Jake finally spoke, his voice softer than usual. "I know it's late, but I needed to see you." Lily didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure why, but her heart was racing. She could feel the weight of his words, the sincerity in them. It wasn't just the casual politeness that she had come to expect from him. This was different. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jake shook his head, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "No, nothing's wrong. I've been thinking." Lily raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. "Thinking about what?" "About us," Jake said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "About how much I've come to look forward to these moments with you. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way I started to care more than I thought I would." Lily's heart skipped a beat at his words. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had known that something was changing between them, but hearing Jake admit it out loud made everything feel so real. She felt a rush of warmth flood her chest, mixed with a wave of uncertainty. She hadn't allowed herself to truly believe that this was more than just a passing connection. But now, standing there in front of her, Jake's words made her realize that this wasn't just a fleeting moment. "I've never really let anyone in, Lily," Jake continued, his eyes meeting hers. "Not like this, but with you, it feels different. I feel like I can be myself, and I don't have to pretend anymore." Lily swallowed hard, unsure of what to say next. She had spent so many years building walls around herself, convinced that she didn't need anyone else. But now, with Jake standing there so open and vulnerable, those walls felt fragile. She had spent so much of her life guarding herself, afraid of getting hurt. But now she wondered if maybe it was time to let someone in. "Jake, Lily began, but her words caught in her throat. She didn't know how to express what she was feeling. It was all so overwhelming, so sudden. She had never allowed herself to hope for something more, but now it seemed like the possibility of a future with Jake was right in front of her. Jake stepped closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know this might seem crazy," he said softly, "but I can't help how I feel. I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I know it's not easy, but I want you to know that I care about you, more than just the food you make, more than just the kind of person you seem to think you are."
"I care about you, Lily." Lily's breath hitched as she felt her heart race.
She didn't know how to respond, but the truth was, she had felt the same way for a while now. But admitting it out loud, acknowledging it, felt like stepping into the unknown. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of change. She had always been so self-sufficient, so used to being alone. But standing there, looking into Jake's eyes, she realized that maybe it wasn't so bad to be vulnerable. Maybe, just maybe, she could take a chance.
"I care about you, too," she whispered, the words finally escaping her lips.
The truth was, she didn't know where this would go or if she was ready for it, but she knew that for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to be alone anymore. Jake smiled softly, his eyes lighting up with something she hadn't seen before. Hope. It was like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, and in that moment, Lily realized that she, too, had been carrying the same weight. Maybe they had both been waiting for this moment, waiting for the other person to take the first step. Jake reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and for the first time, Lily didn't pull away. They stood there, in the quiet of the diner, their hands touching, a small spark of something new and exciting between them. It wasn't a promise of anything, not yet, but it was a beginning, and for the first time in her life, Lily felt like it was a beginning worth taking. As the weeks passed, Lily couldn't help but notice how much her life had changed. It wasn't just Jake's visits to the diner anymore. It was how he had slowly become a part of her daily routine. He wasn't just a customer anymore. He was someone she thought about when she woke up in the morning, and someone who stayed in her mind long after the diner had closed for the night. Jake continued to come by the diner, often staying for hours, talking about everything and nothing at all. They shared more moments, more stories, and even some laughter. Their bond deepened, but there was still a sense of hesitation, a sense of fear that neither of them could ignore. For Lily, it was the fear of truly opening herself up to someone again, of letting herself believe in something more than just the life she had always known. For Jake, it was the fear of offering too much of himself and being rejected. They both carried their own burdens, their own insecurities, but in each other, they had found a connection that neither of them could deny. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the diner grew quiet, Lily found herself wiping down the counter, lost in her thoughts. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up, to see Jake walking in. He was wearing his usual worn boots, but there was something different about him today. He didn't come in with the usual quiet, reserved look that she had come to expect. Today he seemed uneasy. "Hey," Jake said, his voice a little softer than usual. "Can we talk?" Lily felt her heart race a little. She had grown used to their quiet conversations, the casual chats that never really delved too deep. But this time, there was an air of seriousness in his voice, and it made her nervous. She nodded, motioning to the seat across from her. Jake sat down slowly, his hands resting on the table as if he wasn't sure how to begin. Lily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had always been able to read people, but this time she couldn't figure out what Jake was thinking. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice soft. Jake ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit Lily had noticed over the past few weeks. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, his voice quiet. "About everything. About us." "Bad us." Lily felt her stomach tighten. She wasn't sure what he was about to say, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something important. Jake continued, his eyes not quite meeting hers. "I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to pressure you, but I need to know something."
I need to know if you feel the same way I do. If you're ready for something more than just this.
Lily's heart skipped a beat. She knew what he was asking, but the weight of his words made her feel like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. What if she was wrong? What if this connection wasn't real? She had never allowed herself to dream of something more. Never thought that someone like Jake would ever see her for more than just the woman who made his meals. But here he was, asking her to take a chance, to believe that maybe they could have something more. She looked at him, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to say yes, to tell him that she had felt the same way for weeks now. But there was a part of her that held back, a part of her that was scared. "I care about you, Jake," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "But I've been alone for so long. I don't know if I'm ready for anything more. I've spent so many years keeping myself busy, keeping myself closed off. I don't know if I can just open up." Jake looked at her, his eyes softening with understanding. He reached across the table and took her hand in his grip gentle but steady. "I'm not asking you to jump into anything, Lily," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to wait for as long as it takes. I don't want to rush you, but I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Lily felt the weight of his words sink in, and for the first time in a long time she allowed herself to truly believe them. She had spent so many years convinced that she didn't need anyone, that she could do everything on her own. But in that moment, with Jake's hand in hers, she realized that maybe she didn't have to do it alone. Maybe it was okay to let someone in. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also something more, hope. "What if I'm not enough?" she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Jake's expression softened and he squeezed her hand.
You are enough, Lily. You've always been enough.
For the first time, Lily felt like someone truly saw her. Not just the woman who worked in a diner, not just the cook who fed the town, but her. And in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could take a chance on something more, on love, on them. She smiled softly, her heart finally allowing her to let go of the fear she had held on to for so long. "I'm scared, Jake," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I want to try. I want to see where this goes." Jake's smile widened, his eyes shining with relief. "That's all I needed to hear," he said, his voice filled with warmth. As they sat there, their hands still intertwined, Lily felt something shift inside her. She had spent so much time convincing herself that she was fine on her own, but now she realized that maybe she didn't have to be. Maybe, for the first time in her life, she could allow herself to believe in something more. To believe in love, in connection, in the possibility of a future with someone who truly saw her for who she was. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Lily knew that. There would be challenges, fears, and moments of doubt, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She had Jake, and that was enough to start building something new, something she had never dared to dream of before. And as she looked into Jake's eyes, she knew that no matter what happened next, they would face it together. The days after that conversation with Jake were full of change, but not in the way Lily had expected. She had spent so long fearing the unknown, afraid of opening her heart to someone else. But now it felt like a door had been unlocked, and with each passing day, Lily felt herself stepping through it, slowly, carefully, but with a growing sense of hope that she hadn't felt in years. She and Jake continued to see each other, though things had shifted. It wasn't just about the long talks or the shared meals anymore. It was about something deeper, something that neither of them had fully understood at first. There was a tenderness between them now, an unspoken understanding that they were no longer just two people passing through each other's lives. They had become important to one another. Jake had kept his promise to wait, never pushing Lily to move faster than she was comfortable with. He respected her space and let her take things at her own pace. But it was clear from the way they looked at each other, from the way they made each other laugh, that something special was happening. But the doubts still lingered in Lily's heart. She had always kept her walls up, convinced that she didn't need anyone else. But with Jake, she felt something different. She felt seen, valued, not just for her cooking, not just for her work, but for who she truly was. And that made her both happy and afraid. Happiness was unfamiliar to her, especially the kind that came with the possibility of love. She had to remind herself that this was real, that Jake was real, and that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to embrace this new chapter in her life. One evening, after the diner had closed, Jake invited Lily to the ranch for dinner. It wasn't anything fancy, just a quiet meal at the end of a long day. As they sat down at his kitchen table, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the gentle sounds of the night outside, Lily felt at peace in a way she hadn't felt before. It was like this small, quiet moment was exactly what she had been missing in her life. "Thank you for this," Lily said, her voice soft as she looked around at the simple yet cozy kitchen. "I didn't realize how much I needed a change of scenery." Jake smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "I figured you could use a break from the diner," he said, pouring them both a glass of wine. "Sometimes it's good to step away from everything and just be." Lily nodded, taking a sip of the wine. It tasted different here, different in a way that made her feel like she was tasting more than just the wine. She was tasting something new, something that felt like it was slowly opening up in her heart. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she admitted after a moment of silence, "about us, about where this is going." Jake set his glass down and looked at her, his expression serious yet gentle. "And what have you been thinking?" Lily took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She had spent so long being afraid of what might happen, but now she realized that this moment was important. This was her chance to take that final step forward, to stop holding back. I think I'm ready. I'm ready to see where this goes." Jake's eyes lit up with a quiet joy, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "You don't have to make any promises, Lily," he said softly. "We don't have to rush anything. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Lily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I know, and that's what makes all the difference." They spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and sharing stories. It was simple, but it was perfect. It was everything Lily had needed, even though she hadn't realized it until now. For the first time, she allowed herself to let go of her fears, to let herself enjoy this connection with Jake, without worrying about what might happen in the future. She knew that they couldn't predict what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, that didn't matter. The next few days passed by quickly, but they felt different. Every moment felt like it mattered more now. Jake continued to visit the diner, and their conversations grew deeper, more meaningful. They spent more time together, whether it was helping Jake with his ranch work or simply sitting together in the quiet of the evening, watching the sunset. Lily had begun to realize that she had been holding back for so long, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of being vulnerable. But now, she was beginning to understand that true happiness came from opening up to the people who mattered. One afternoon, just as the diner was closing, Jake came in with a small, wrapped box. His eyes were sparkling, and he had a nervous smile on his face. "I wanted to give you something," he said, his voice a little shaky. Lily looked at the box in surprise. "Jake, you didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted, holding out the box. "But I wanted to. You've done so much for me, and I just wanted to show you how much I appreciate you and how much you mean to me." Lily took the box from him. Her heart pounding in her chest, she slowly unwrapped it, revealing a small, delicate necklace. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a simple silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a heart. But it was perfect. It was exactly what she needed. "I know it's not much," Jake said, his voice soft, "but I thought it might be a good reminder. A reminder that you're important and you're not alone." Lily felt a lump form in her throat as she looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This means so much to me." Jake smiled and gently placed the necklace around her neck. "You deserve it," he said. "You deserve to know how much you mean to me." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with a feeling she had never known before. In that moment, she realized that everything had changed. She was no longer the woman who kept herself hidden, afraid to take chances. She was no longer the woman who believed she didn't deserve love. With Jake, she had found something real, something she had never allowed herself to hope for. As she stood there wearing the necklace that Jake had given her, she knew that this was just the beginning. There would still be challenges ahead, still moments of doubt and fear. But for the first time, she felt like she had the strength to face them. With Jake by her side, she wasn't afraid of what the future might hold. And as they stood there together, their hands intertwined, Lily knew that she had found something worth fighting for, something that was real, something she had never thought possible, and that she realized was worth more than anything she had ever imagined.